We'd like to welcome everyone once again to our NCG studios in Texas. It's good to be here as always. And in case anyone watches regularly, might be used to seeing my son sitting next to me. Well, my son is sitting next to me. It's not Stephen. Might be used to seeing his lovely face, but you're seeing the face of my son Thomas today. Good to have you with me, Thomas.
Good to be here.
So, how are you doing?
All right. A little tired, but good.
Oh, okay. Well, we're just going to have a good time today.
I'm just going to listen.
Nah, you'll want to chime in. You'll find a good place to say something. You'll have something to say. But without hesitation today, we're going to welcome our guest, who's becoming a regular guest, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm sure that everyone else is too. We're glad to have Dr. Jones with us today from the Pensacola studio. Are you there, Dr. Jones?
I hope so. How are you guys doing?
Can we turn some volume up here? I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, but I think we can adjust that on this end.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me better now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Much better, much better. Well, I certainly the subject matter this morning. In my estimation, that teaching from this morning needs to go around the world. We're talking about a vine and some branches, and I've heard that particular teaching of Jesus probably a number of times in my life, but I've never heard it quite like I heard it this morning. And, I must say it was wonderful. And actually, it kind of gave me something to think about as far as subject matter for this afternoon. So I would like to bring that up. Maybe if you want to kind of do a brief overview of what you talked about this morning, then I'd like to relate it to actually something that the Apostle Paul talked about. So if you would just kind of go into that a little bit, what you were dealing with this morning.
I think it's rather a simple chapter. It's chapter 15 of the book of John. And in brief, I'm simply leaving the model that the church gave us. I think that the church probably is the most harmful entity on planet Earth. They give us doctrines that frighten our children. They give us the kind of meta-language that's confusing, the kind of meta-language that would have you think that Jesus is trying to push theism. And I think that's extremely disingenuous of the church to do so. Now, it's not just one church, but it's all of the churches. This is why I'm so against church. I'm very anti-church because I think that what it does, it takes people and places them into an institution, institutional style living, and it takes them into a context where they can't think appropriately. With that said, when you look at the terms, I am the vine and you are the branches, this is simply an analogy, if you will. He's just using metaphor to make a point. He's not saying, listen, I am the true vine, the only way to heaven, the ticket man, the mediator, that kind of thing. He's not suggesting that at all. What he's simply trying to do is trying to convey something to some people who were fishermen, people who simply worked every day, common people. And yes, Luke supposedly was the most educated of all of them. But my point is, when you're trying to do a teaching on something so basic, and that would be love, he has to get their attention. He has to tell this story in a very simple way. I'm the vine, you're the branches. There's no way you're going to get this because you were raised in the synagogue. You were raised in an institution. And I'll be honest with you, when I look at what these guys were facing through the means of Judaism, I would say that the church is 1,000 times more corrupt than the synagogue. And so Jesus had it difficult, but I think that it's even more difficult today because we have corrupted the ideas even more today. To get to the point, he's not saying I'm the vine, you're the branches, and you know, if you're not productive, I'm going to start cutting you off and putting you into the fire as if there is this hell. He's simply saying, can I use analogy simply to make some teaching points? And so as a brilliant teacher, he makes his teaching points. He even comes up with this idea of using a literary father. He's not talking about a real heavenly father like most people in church talk about, but he's simply using the father image as one who he can paint the picture of, hey, we do need to submit one to another. In other words, true love understands that submission is a necessary factor in a relationship. I don't care how you look at it. A man needs to submit to the woman and the woman to the man. Mm-hmm. And so the point is, he teaches many different principles in this, but the bottom line is he winds up simply saying, all of this is wrapped up in my commandments. And he's not talking about the Mosaic commandments, but he's talking about his commandments. The commandments like, you've heard it stated, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I'm going to tell you something that's much better than that, something that makes sense. Don't resist an evildoer. When someone does you wrong, don't try to fight back, in other words. And then he goes further than that. He said, you know, you've heard it stated, love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. He said, I'm going to tell you something that will revolutionize your life. Love your neighbor and also love your enemy. And so Jesus came along not to teach theology or to come up with an idea of saying, hey, you guys need a canon. And we must make a mental note that all of these people were not inspired to put together a Bible. They were inspired to write different writings to different people groups, not to harmonize all these things together, but simply to treat various problems that people were having back then. Unfortunately, the church came along and put it in a book and canonized it and tried to harmonize all of these problems together as if it has some sense of unity. And once again, the church is guilty of creating the biggest lie ever known to mankind. And so Jesus comes along and he tries his best to defeat religion. And here we've been doing what? In the name of Christ, we're calling ourselves Christian and trying to suggest that we are representing Christ. And I would think that that would be a major deception in itself. So Christianity is guilty of being the institution or the entity that has created more lies than not. That's in brief.
Yeah. Well, for some reason, we got the gist of everything you were saying, but there was some of it was kind of broken. I don't know if it's on our end or your end, but hopefully it's worked itself out. Just thought I'd make you aware of that because, like I said, we caught the gist of what you were saying, but we missed a few of the words here and there. There was a little bit of breaking up going on. But, to me, when I think about what you're saying, I think about what the church has had for all these years to mess up. I mean, before Jesus came along, you didn't have his teachings to try to inject into, what was already a mess. But if you take something that's a mess and you try to make what he taught fit into it, I couldn't agree with you more that it just makes matters worse to a large degree. And the thought that I had and that I wanted to bring up in association with this has to do with something that Paul talked about. He brought it up to the Corinthians, and it's, to me, it's one of the more significant things that I think about and that I see so differently now than I have in the past, mainly because he brings it up again in the book that we call Ephesians, when he speaks of this thing called the body. And to the Corinthians, he says, he talks about the body, the physical body, as having many units, many parts. And it's easy for me, and I think it should be easy for anyone, to look at themselves and say, I really like the way I'm put together. I work well. My hands, my feet, my eyes, my ears. I don't know of any function that I would want to do without if I don't have to. And I, for one, I'll be the first one to say I appreciate every single part of my body. And when it functions well, I'm happy. When it doesn't, I've got problems. And the difference, let me just point out the difference, and I want you to speak to this. And when I think about this one sitting next to me, I can say, I can recognize, this is a part of the body. This is my son, but I also see him as a part of this body that we're in reference to here, and I can understand, I can recognize that he's a part of it. He's a vital part of it, just as we all are. And that is the difference for me now when I say we all are. Because in Paul's letter to the Ephesians, if you will, if I can call it that, he says there's just one body, and there's one God and Father of all, who's over all, through all, and in all. And this body is apparently everyone, rather than, I was taught by the church, just the chosen few, just the ones who decide to believe and to, do the XYZ to become a part of it. Otherwise, you're not a part of this body. But now, when I think of this, I think in terms of what you were just talking about, becoming just a functioning part, and be looking at one another as someone that we need, someone that we don't want to do without, because it's a functioning part of a unit that works so well together. And so if you would elaborate on this, tell me if I'm barking up the right tree, whatever.
I think that you're headed in a magnificent direction. For instance, when you look at the church, you're looking at something that doesn't represent anything of what Jesus ever said. And the reason that I keep bringing this up, it's because church is about institutional life. Church is about a concept by which we're going to have various doctrines. Church is about being exclusive. Church is about saying this is what we have, and we have fixed belief. Jesus didn't come along and teach something that would be the premise of fixed beliefs at all. Jesus didn't come along and say, this is what you need, institutions, so you can have someone in control of you. He was trying to get people to own up to their own issues in life. Whatever problem that you might have, you need to own that problem and deal with it. And so the church would rather have you think that, we've got penal substitution, therefore whatever you've done in life, just believe sweet Jesus, and you don't have to own up to anything. And so once again, you're comparing what Jesus talked about, that is a body that's much variegated with all kinds of beliefs. But Jesus was talking about this body in which he could accept. In other words, we're talking about unconditional acceptance. When has the church ever accepted people just like they were or are? They've never done that, not in the history of the church. The church is already, they've always put a prerequisite. If you're going to be someone who we accept, these are the things that you're going to have to do. For instance, You're going to have to get saved, believe the right thing, look at our dogmas, look at our doctrines, be baptized, and that kind of bullshit. And that's what the church has given us, just lots and lots of something that just really controls human beings rather than complements them. Jesus came along teaching the idea of a body. It's much variegated. Not all of the parts are the same, and sometimes this may get a bit confusing, but the Apostle Paul was attempting to get people to accept all of the parts instead of rejecting the parts. For instance, have you ever noticed that the church has a difficult time accepting the facts? For instance, when it comes to the doctrine of hell, how many Christians or churchmen are willing to sit down and talk with you about that? When it comes to the doctrine of soteriology, why are they not willing to sit down and look at the facts, that is, of what the Greek text actually says about what Christ did? He didn't come to save us 2,000 years ago. He didn't come to justify us 2,000 years ago. He didn't come to set up a system by which we can be sanctified and then glorified and then ultimately go to heaven. He never done any of that. And yet the church, these are the primary doctrines of the church. Mm-hmm. I keep picking on the church because you have to place the church in contrast to what you're suggesting. You're talking about organisms, people, a body functioning, instead of living life in institutional style living and being told this is what we believe, this is what we teach, and doggone, the pastor is going to teach on this. If not, he gets fired. This is a political thing. Jesus knew that wouldn't work because it doesn't allow for the context of something so simple. Institutional style living doesn't allow the fabric of what's called love, because institutional style living, that is according to the church model, it has more divisions than not. We only have 38,000 different denominations today, and we have I don't know how many divisions within those categories. But my point is, you've never had a more divided society than we have on Sunday mornings. I mean, people are all over the place, and so the church has been the thing that has damned man. And I don't believe in a real Satan, but if there's ever been something that's been anti-Jesus, it would be the church, because the church doesn't stand for Jesus in any sense of the word, never has, never will, because they have no honesty in it. And so you have a handful of people in church who want to do good, who want to find a sense of community. And so I'm proud that some people are at least trying to make themselves feel better in spite of all of the lies and all of the things that are wrong there. And I don't think that it would be logical to attempt to fix the church. It would be like fixing the KKK and trying to get it to run better. And so I hope that I'm being clear. I'm trying to get people to leave church instead of joining the KKK, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I know that, when I can certainly speak for myself, when I talk about how much my vision has cleared up, I've been one for a number of years that has wanted to see things clearly, correctly, to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. I look back at my own history, my own past, and I see myself in the past as having been more a part of the problem than the solution. I was talking to another one of my sons yesterday, and I gave an analogy, and this might or might not be appropriate, but in the book of Revelation, we do see some of this kind of terminology used, but I picture vomit.
What a picture.
Yeah, a lovely picture, right?
A wonderful picture.
But if someone were to swallow something valuable and they needed to get it back, that would be probably the easiest way to get it, just to empty what's on the stomach, and it would be messy. It would be nasty. But if you could retrieve the valuable thing by going through the slime and recovering it. That would just be what you'd need to do. And when I think of my own experience, that's kind of what I picture. You know, in the past, I've tried to help people. I've tried to do things beneficial toward others. But it's kind of like I had a statute of limitations. I was limited because by my own belief system, because, you know, if the response didn't come in a certain amount of time, or, you know, I'm going to help you a little, but then you're going to have to do it on your own type thing, that would have to be good enough. But, you know, once again, when I think about my children, I don't know of a time in my life, I don't see it ever happening that I'll ever come to the place where I'll say, you know, that's all I'm going to do for you. That's enough. You should have got it by now. This is where it stops. And when I think about the term love itself, you know, the very term, the very definition, one of the first things that Paul states about it is that it's long-suffering, or if you will, or patient. Well, if it's patient, when is it not patient? If it's long-suffering, when does it give up? When does it quit? And by the time he gets through describing it, it basically says it doesn't. It doesn't fail. And my love in the past, if you will, if you want to call it that, it had an end. It had a stopping point. It had a place where the patient runs out, just like supposedly God does. You know, he puts up with things so long, then he pours out his vengeance, even though that's not a part of his character. I don't know how he would do that, but it took me a while just to realize that that's not even a part of his character. So, you know, like I say, I had to come out of that system. I had to get out of that in order to see things as clearly as I do now.
You know, I think that a lot of us have been prone, and I'm raising my hand because I was guilty of it. I think we're looking for some kind of celebrity to come along who can woo us. And I feel sorry for the younger generation in a sense, because there are so many fads within the church that would create an environment in which is like bait. People are being baited to come to church, being lured, if you will. There are so many programs just to lure you to something that tragically will take advantage of you and your family. The reason that I keep speaking on this, here lately I've been dealing with the subject of homosexuality. And my wife and I have made it clear that homosexuality isn't a sin. But unfortunately, theists don't want to include and love and accept homosexuals and their way of life. They want to say all of this is not of God. They want to say that it's sinful. And they're trying to encourage people to change their lifestyle, get right with God, things of that nature. And there have been several organizations set up to try to free gays. And here more recently, all of these organizations seem to be crumbling because the ones who have been trying to rescue gays away from their lifestyle and lesbians away from their lifestyles have found that they have been very, very abusive toward these human beings. And lots of them now are confessing, we are tired of abusing human beings, and therefore they are disavowing their practice, which is good. But for some reason, the church takes forever to make any kind of good decision. For instance, the Southern Baptists never made the decision that modern slavery was wrong until 1995. Now, you have to ask the question, how long should it take a rational thinking people to say that slavery is wrong? And still to this day, they haven't renounced ancient slavery. So the question would be, do I need to become a part of that organization or that institutional style thinking? I don't think so, because it will leaven you. According to Jesus, he said just a little bit of that leavening in that religious system, it's going to mess you up. And I think Jesus knew what he was talking about. And my point is, it's not that the church is just wrong about homosexuality. It's wrong about hell. It's wrong about salvation. It's wrong about the Trinity. It's wrong about the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit type mindset. It's wrong. And yet people still participate in that kind of deception. And that's why I think the sanctuary of a church is built to support denial. And I have talked with so many psychologists who are suggesting that the kind of denial, whether it's subtle or not, is superfluous to the point. It creates something within the person that sooner or later that they're going to have to deal with in a major way. And I don't know. I don't know why it can't be just this simple. We're all different. We're all over the world. We're all God's created children. And if you don't even believe in God, you're just part of humanity. In other words, we have humanists getting together, and they recognize the human condition, and they are trying to do something about the human condition without trying to put demands on people. And they're not trying to judge people. They're just willing to deal with the human condition. The church has never been capable of doing so, but Jesus was. And the church keeps calling humanists, you're part of that secular humanism. And they use the term secular because it places distance between, the church and, these people involved in humanist movements. And my point is, the church keeps looking for a reason to say that man has been placed at a distance. In other words, you have man over there and God over here, and there's a separation. And somehow we need to get closer together. When I look at you and your son, I look at two people who are wonderful and powerful. I look at two people who love each other immensely. And I can say with confidence that you would never think like the God of the church thinks. He doesn't separate himself from his son when he does something wrong, but what he does is he simply embraces his son and will continue to do so come hell or high water. And these are the kind of stories that Jesus told, like the prodigal son. It wasn't, I don't care what you've done, son. You've lived in the pig pen, so what? Let's just keep moving forward. Let's throw a party. You're wonderful. You're my son. I'm proud of you. Even though you threw away everything that I've ever given you, you're still my son. And this is what we call, true love. The kind of bonding that says, I won't leave you, I won't forsake you, I won't throw you out, you're not a heretic. However, in church life, people are called heretics, they're called reprobates, they're called all kinds of incendiary terms, simply because the church has the kind of standards that excludes the majority of human beings.
Well, unfortunately, when you say those things, once again, I remember with shame a lot of the things that I used to believe to be true. And one of the toughest things I think I ever heard somebody say had to do, it was a man talking about his own children. And this man was a preacher. I don't know if he's still preaching. I hope not, but I guess that's neither here nor there. But he said about his own children, he said, one of the hardest things I have to think about is realizing that when I look at my kids, I don't know whether they're going to go to heaven or not. It's just hard for me to think about that some of them may actually go to hell. And, to me, just the damage from that alone, because people get convinced of that. I can't say that I wasn't convinced of something along those lines a few years ago. And however crazy it seems to me now, I can identify once again with what Paul said when he said, asked a certain group of people, who has bewitched you? And we have so much better information than that to start with. And as you pointed out many times, we have our own conscience. We have our own values that actually transcend that kind of thinking. And yet we expect so much less from God, apparently.
Right. One of the things that I love about the New Covenant group is that we have atheists and theists alike coming here. And we have people sharing their ideas from different points. They're all over the place. And it's not important that any of us convert each other to anything. We're simply having a conversation. It's out of respect. And one of the things that I can testify to is that I've never seen the magnitude of love that I see now, that I'm capable of seeing, that human beings are human beings, whether they believe in God or not. They can come together and love one another, look at the same evidence together, come to various conclusions. You don't have to shove religion down their throat. You don't. In fact, what you need to do is you need to walk away from religion so you can be reasonable. And so I have the support not just of a handful of people, but I have the support of the scientific community. The scientific community is demonstrating over and over again the tragedies that come along with all of these mindsets that come from religion and church. And so when are we going to walk completely away from the very thing that has abused humanity since its very first step?
Yeah. That is true.
It's this is not an easy conversation in some instances, because people become addicted like drug addicts, intoxicated possibly with, just being involved with people they love. And this is not about the people in the church. The people in the church are wonderful, and, they're finding ways of surviving church. They will get together and be really nice after church, during church, or whatever. I applaud the people, love the people, but they could do human beings all over the world 1,000 times better if they would just walk away from the church. The church doesn't have any substance that will accept all human beings and actually love all human beings. In other words, today it's sad. Our politics are such because of religious mindsets. You can't even become, you can't run for dog catcher in the state of Texas and get elected if you're an atheist. And so when you start thinking about that, there's a lot of prejudice in the state of Texas when it comes to whether you're a believer in God or not. That's why most of these politicians, they wave their Bible, and they love doing that. Yeah, I'm a Bible believer, and I've got all the Judeo-Christian principles down. And what does this really say? Because I don't think that any of us really believe the crap that's in our Bibles, for the most part. It's just a handful of things in the Bible that would be good. The rest of it is, as I stated, it's crap. And so, when an atheist can't stand up, and I'm talking about wonderful people, but we don't look, and I'm talking about when I was in church, I didn't look at atheists as people who are wonderful. I looked at them as if they were demonic. I was biased, and I'm simply confessing to my perceptions. I've been there and done that, and so have you, Darryl. And we walked away from this. And when you walk out of Egypt, you still have a little bit of Egypt inside of you, and we're still trying to get rid of the crap, in a sense, trying to get rid of that nature of how we were conditioned to be and how we were thinking. And now that we're capable of looking at people on so many different levels and categories, we can see that the only way that we can find real solutions is to walk away from church and find something that's honest and start confronting things. For instance, why do we have so many people that will die today because they don't have enough water? Why do we have so many people who will starve to death because they have no food? Why are so many people economically being put to the side? And the bottom line has to do with this. We've had war after war after war, and I'm talking about world wars, and it's all been in the name of God. Has to do with these religious beliefs. And at some point in time, we need to ask ourselves as human beings, when are we going to quit practicing that kind of nonsense and even participating with it?
Yeah. I certainly agree. You know, I was, by the way, we had a good response this morning. We served lunch instead of breakfast. And
Now, fill me in. You had brisket, correct?
we did. And it was the best.
Yeah, Tom, you must like brisket, correct?
I do like brisket.
How much do you like brisket, Tom?
I don't believe I can think of a time that I've ever been burnt out on brisket.
Wow.
He's a true Texan.
I can understand.
In that sense.
Yeah, I like your hair. It looks nice, and I need to nuance. Most of the Furlow family has flaming red hair, and so if you ever see anyone on Darryl's show, you're going to see this flaming red hair, except for Darryl's. It turned white because he said, "Oh my God," and it just went white for some reason. But it seems like everyone has red hair, which is a nice sign. Yeah, you know, the Jews were always looking for signs, and they could tell you're a Furlow with the red hair. That makes sense.
Well, the sign is there, I guess, for what it's worth.
That's true.
But we had a good group of people here this morning, and opened up some good conversation. We got to talking about some of the things that we've been talking about here this afternoon, and you know, I keep getting more and more a sense of that people are open for this. I know there's a lot of people that are not, I'm sure, but you know, if you get enough people joining the conversation, I'm convinced it's going to make a difference.
I agree. Let me compliment you and your family. Your family is, comprised of people who have wonderful work ethics. They have morals that are just unreal. We're talking about excellent morals. They have the capacity to love, and they're very likable. And anyone watching, if you get the chance to meet the Furlow family, it will be a blessing. It's like going to heaven. If you're an atheist, you want to go to heaven, just go to see the Furlows, and you'll go to heaven real quick. They eat a lot, but they don't get fat like me, and so that's a blessing. But with that said, we have somebody telling us we need to sign off in 5 minutes, so I'm not in control of your show, but I'm certainly here listening to someone who's in control of me.
Well, I would just say in response to what you just said, y'all come. We're here, and our house is your house. Now, don't everybody come at once, but we want to meet everybody that we can. We just enjoy people.
If you let us know ahead of time, we might have some brisket ready.
That's right.
That would be awesome. Let me ask you a question. Can I talk to you for a moment, Tom?
Go ahead.
Now, you work for Stephen for several years now. Stephen is your older brother, and he actually is the manager of Tamales, this Mexican restaurant, correct?
Yes, sir.
What dish did you learn how to cook there, or did you do any cooking?
There's actually very few that I don't know how to cook there.
Okay, what's the secret to making the best Mexican food? Is there a secret, or is this just all over the place? You just have to be good at knowing how to cook Mexican dishes.
It's all in the preparation. Of course, the way you cook it, the way you season it. It's just, you just got to know what you're doing.
Okay, I can understand that. When it comes to preparing, let's say, beef for a taco, what would you do? What would you suggest to me? I love eating tacos, and I love having a nice beef product. And I do love fish tacos. I don't know if you've ever had mahi mahi or anything like that in a taco, but it's wonderful. But give us some hints about this this beefy taco stuff.
Oh, stop it. You're making me hungry.
Well, I've done very little preparation when it comes to the ground beef. We have the chefs and then we have the cooks. And the chefs are the ones that they prepare all the seasonings and everything. They make us a big pan of our ground beef, which we make our tacos with. But I mean, you'll see them start at 9 o'clock and they'll start cooking, and it might be ready about 11 maybe. So it usually takes them about 2 hours to prepare the ground beef, and you can watch the way they stir it, the way they season it, just a combination of all of it.
I have a question that was asked of me the other day, and I didn't know how to respond because I'm not in that particular discipline. I don't know that much about it. I love to cook, but most of my thrills are with Italian food because I love Italian food. But the question has to do with refried beans. If I go to, say, a restaurant that's more southwestern, they're going to call these beans smashed beans. If I go to, say, a restaurant here in the South and it's a Mexican restaurant, they're going to call them refried beans. And so are they actually refried, or is that just a term?
Well, they're not necessarily fried as in like your typical deep fryer, but the way we make them is we take a huge big pot, and I guess it could be called a fryer, and they boil the pinto beans until they soften, and then they drain them out, and then they mash them, and then they season them up, and then they recook them again. So technically it is cooked twice in the fryer pan. So
okay, that makes sense. Because we love smashed beans or refried beans. And yeah, my wife loves the black beans. The black beans are awesome. And we could go on, but we have someone just waving their arms. We have 1 minute, by the way, if you're not keeping the time.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you. Do we have a good show coming up at 8 o'clock tonight?
I hope so. The guest that we attempted to schedule, it fell apart, and so we're probably going to have just one of these conversations that may get into some substantive things. One of the things that I will say, a lot of times when we have guests, I get bored, and I'm being very honest with you, because I feel like when we have an author of a book on, I feel like I'm meeting with a politician. I feel like they don't want to be so honest about the subject matter. I think they want to just defend their book and sell their book. I'm not trying to be an Oprah Winfrey. I'm not trying to win brownie points for complimenting them. I would rather ask the tough questions. In fact, I've asked some universalists to come to the table of discussion to be on our show, and we've only had one universalist to say, yes, we will come to be on your show now, because I made it very clear I'd like to ask some hardball questions, because I'm not convinced that universalism is good. I'm certainly not pro-Catholic, and I'm not pro the people, but I'm not. I hate their doctrines. Hate is an understatement, and I certainly hate Protestantism. That is their doctrines. And when it comes to universalism, it seems like when you talk with them, I feel like I'm talking with people who just want to talk doctrine, and they want to hear a lot of chanting and amen, 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 amen. And I keep asking them questions about the text, and they don't want to go there, and that troubles me. I don't like systems that are organized like that just say, well, this is just another form of church, and we're going to stay stupid. I'm tired of that. I would rather move on and not participate in any of it.
Yeah, I think there's more to it than that, for sure.
Yeah. Hey, I've enjoyed it, and how can I do my hair like yours, Tom?
Well, if you
Get some dye.
get some dye and maybe some, I think they call them weaves that they weave into your hair.
Oh, I
to give
thought
you
you
a little
said
more of
weed.
No, weave.
Oh, weed. Okay.
Weaves.
Don't get weed, but get weaves. Okay.
If I recall correctly, your hair's a good bit thinner than mine.
Thinner. Okay. That's true.
Who wants fat
Yeah,
hair?
Joey said that's low. That's low. Well, your hair looks nice. Mine is thin. It's letting go. It's tired, but that's just life when you get old.
It's still good.
Okay, we've got a timeout in the back, and so we're going to have to get off
All
this show. Darryl, why don't you close out your show?
All right. Well, we've certainly enjoyed it as usual. Look forward to much more. Even today, we've got more shows coming up starting at 5 o'clock with, I believe, Greg Braid and Joey Livingston. Stay tuned for that. Bob Graves will be up later. And then Dr. Jones at 8 o'clock. We'll be looking forward to seeing you here next Sunday. Thank you for your time.